All right, welcome to NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. This episode is on my beloved Chicago Bears, and I am joined by the guys from Believe in Monsters podcast. How's it going?
Doing well. Thank you for having us. Excited to talk some Bears.
Absolutely, and that's and you are Lucas.
I am Chris Krogman. Find me
Oh,
on Twitter at ShyBears1985. We do the BIM pod at BIM_pod every week. Most of the time, it's been every other week with the off season, kind of winding down. So we drop pods regularly, talking Bears.
Absolutely. And I thought Lucas maybe talked there, but you guys sound similar.
Yeah, you'll hear the more I talk. I got the Northeast accent. I don't think Chris has that, but yeah, things are going well. We talked for about an hour and a half yesterday at length about the head coach and GM hiring. So
Yeah,
it's an exciting time to be a Bears fan, and there's just so much going on with the team. I mean, the on-field product hasn't been great, the past year or so, but hopefully we're turning the page here to something better.
absolutely. And before we kind of get into that, I just want to get your takes on, that initial George McCaskey press conference and just how much of a mess that was.
Yeah, so I think it was a disaster. George, is pretty polished when he comes on and talks to the media at first, and he kind of expressed his gratitude for Pace and Nagy, and I'm gonna have to call him that because we got Ryan and Matt again.
Yeah.
So we can't just say Ryan and Matt or it gets confusing. So yeah, his gratitude for Pace and Nagy as men, and the Bears are a very family oriented team. They've been owned for since the beginning of football by the same family. So they, when they hire somebody, they hug them in and they're part of the family. So it's hard for them to let these guys go. And I get it. So, there's a lot of sentiment to George. And I think, he feels that at a deep level. So when he has to let people go, and he gets pushback, he gets a little flustered and starts kind of talking a little crazy. And, coming out of that press conference, I had no faith. I told the guys in our group chat, like, this is going to suck. This is going to be a disaster. I'm 42 years old now. I've seen this happen time and time again. I'm done with it, bro. I'm just going to sit back and pray to God that something goes right and we fall into a good coaching candidate, good GM candidate. But I think the searching committee was a great idea. Having Soup and Tanisha, in that search party was fantastic. Having Polian as much shit as they got for him being, ancient. I think he's still in touch with what's going on in the NFL and knows how to build people. So I think it actually came out well, but the initial press conference was a disaster, like you said.
Absolutely. Yeah. What do you think, Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, Chris hit it on the head, and I mean, he had that comment where he said, I'm only a fan, but it's like you are the man in charge of running a multi-billion-dollar organization, and you are in charge of putting the people who are going to lead this franchise, this organization, into something bigger. And so, just that kind of comment is, I mean, that's not what you want to hear coming from the owner of the team, and. I kind of think the Bears' introductory press conference with Poles and Eberflus and Fields, I think they kind of use Fields to kind of alleviate that a little bit there, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's get right into that. I don't know about you, but I was impressed with Ryan Poles in that press conference and from the beginning, and I'm even impressed by his wedding video. So like I'm all on board with Ryan Poles and him being a football guy. From everything the Bears in that initial press conference, not having enough football people in leadership. I'm on board. How about you guys?
Yeah, I would say with the GM, it's definitely a little bit harder to gauge kind of what success they'll have, especially, a lot of these GMs are young. I mean, this is not to scare people off, but this is very reminiscent of Ryan Pace's rise to fame. I mean, he was only in his mid-30s as well, and everyone at the time said, "Hey, this is a great hire." And I gave Pace the benefit of the doubt more than not, but overall, the body of work wasn't fantastic. So, there is a little bit of pause there. He is young, but just working, I think it speaks volumes that he worked under 3 separate general managers in Kansas City. So 3 different regimes, and he helped the Chiefs. It seemed like he was instrumental in helping rebuild that offensive line, which if you listen to the presser and kind of just his his random interviews here and there, it's all starting up front for him, which I think is fantastic. And something the Bears haven't had in a while is having, just an offensive line who wants to fight with intensity and has a little bit of a mean streak to him. I mean, that's what you need when you have a franchise quarterback and he's getting hit a million times.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Lucas. He was in Kansas City for, I think, 13 or 14 years, through 3 regimes, like Lucas mentioned, came up with Scott Pioli, with his connections at BC when Pioli used to go scout over there. He picked him up essentially as an intern. He said Poles could jump at the job fast enough. And that speaks volumes to him just, having that hunger to be involved with the game. Said he loves football on a level that he, you don't see from many people. Just loves the details of the game. And that has just been the consistent feedback from folks, is that he's extremely detail oriented. He knows the game. He knows what he wants. It sounds like he really knows how to, at least knows what he wants out of a person. And that to me is such a big deal. Great. You know football, but where's your heart? Do you have the drive, the work ethic, the, blue collar, pull up your bootstraps and get to work kind of mentality that it takes to grind it day in and day out? And as Lucas mentioned, him being an offensive lineman, throughout that press conference, it's he spoke well kind of once he got through the little bit of emotion talking about, the Chiefs days and whatnot. He kind of had a little bit of an edge to him, in my opinion. He kind of was he answered calm, cool, collective, but he seems like somebody you don't really want to upset. And from what I've read, the initial evaluations from him on the offensive line and what he saw in the Cleveland game, what he saw, Ifedi do to Jenkins once he finally did show that intensity that we all want to see, because that's what I want to see out of my front 5 is some intensity and some drive and some violence. And that was the word they used enough for me to be excited about, what Poles is looking for, essentially what Eberflus is going to be looking for as well. So I think Poles is going to do well, and him bringing in Ian Cunningham from the Eagles as a assistant GM and creating that position, I think was very smart. And Cunningham has a lot of respect in the league, came from good organizations like the Ravens and the Eagles. So that excites me as well. So I think Poles is going to do well.
Absolutely. I mean, you talked about the line, and I love the quote that was attributed to Poles about, noticing in all the film that when, Justin Fields, when their quarterback went down, the lineman didn't go to help him up, and I love that he, number one, noticed that, right? And number two, that he's making that a point, because that is kind of the edge, I think that you need in leadership in the building that hasn't been there.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's still early to kind of, like I said, evaluate, what these guys want to do. But you can at least see that Eberflus and Poles kind of have an aligned vision for, it's the game is also about the little things, concentrating on the little things like penalties, like picking your QB up, like finishing guys on the pile, stuff like that. It all makes a difference in the grand scheme of things. And for once, it does feel like the GM and the coach kind of have a very similar mindset, and that's very apparent right away, which, like I said, it should give you reason for optimism.
Yeah, and let's kind of go into that as well. I mean, I'm more optimistic for Poles than I am for Eberflus at this time. I don't know if you saw the video of Justin Fields, meeting Coach Eberflus and Poles. It was kind of like Eberflus had kind of just like this weird kind of, dad vibe, and he hugged him. And I usually look at that because, Fields is Justin Fields is looking beyond him in that hug. And it's kind of interesting, just that dynamic. So what do you see? What do each of you see, being the strengths of Coach Eberflus, and what are your thoughts on, what he can bring to the Bears?
Yeah, so I think just going off the press conference, just going off things I've read about Coach Eberflus, I want to run through a brick wall for that guy already. I'm very excited. I think he's going to bring, he talked about his hits system, hustle, intensity, turnovers, and what's the last one? Smarts or something like that. Anyway, where he's got like an idea of what he wants to see out of his team. You got to hustle. You got to be intense. You got to take the ball away, and you got to be smart about it. Smart
situationally. I think that's what it was.
That's right. That's right. So I think, him having, a vision, is something that I think Nagy could never speak to and tell us what's this Bears football team going to look like. And you kind of go back to what George had said as to what are you looking for in the next coach and the next GM, and this is what he said, hardworking, gritty, tough, kind of that Midwest grind it hardcore attitude where they just want to be a tough football team. And I think I'm excited to see that. We know his system has worked here in Chicago before with the 4-3 cover 2 zone, essentially. Eberflus and Fields, I get a vibe from Fields that's kind of how he is with a lot of people, just kind of aloof and looking past. And I don't.
That's a great point.
See a real deep connection with him like immediately until he kind of knows you and trusts you, and then it's more like a relationship building kind of thing. I don't know. That's just a vibe I get from Justin. Not to say that he doesn't connect with people. I think he just takes a minute to do it. But I think I also think that they, being Poles and Eberflus, and they kind of said this in the press conference, they were very non-committal on the entire roster right now, right? They weren't overly excited about any one player. They didn't want to say one thing or the other. Poles later said, he was excited about Fields' talents and things like that. But as far as Eberflus goes and, getting guys that hustle, getting guys that want to work hard, knowing that this is going to cause roster turnover just in those guys who don't want to do that kind of thing. It kind of makes me excited. It's exactly what I want to see. And like Lucas mentioned earlier, attention to detail and, lack of penalties, I think is something that has driven us bonkers over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I would say, I know you mentioned your confidence in Poles is probably a little bit higher than Eberflus. I think I'm the opposite here. And it's mainly just because what I've seen out of the Colts defense the past 4 years is I've seen a defense that really, on paper, they have DeForest Buckner and Darius Leonard, but outside of that, they really haven't invested a ton in their defense, and they've been a top 10 unit 3 out of 4 years and always among the top in turnovers. And to me, that's just a sign of great coaching, pure and simple. So Eberflus just seems like a guy, he wants to have that CEO role. He's not going to call plays, but I'm sure he'll have a big influence in defensive play calling. But really, I mean, we know how this league works. It all depends on offense. And I think Getsy's a good fit for Fields, but he has to pray that works out because he's putting a first-time, offensive play caller with a young quarterback and basically a young offensive staff. So not that I don't trust him, but he's putting a lot of eggs in one basket and hoping he's getting it right. So we will see on that front, but I think that really could determine how good of a coach we see Eberflus as is really, can he fix the offense? Because a good coach is a good coach, but you can't be an offense or defensive coordinator. You need to be a good football coach, pure and simple. But a lot of people are going to judge it on how that offense performs, really.
Yeah, and I don't know, kind of where you guys were at before, the hire and everything. Obviously the push was, get an offensive coach, because you want to fix the offense, but that the problem is we did that before with, Nagy, and that just, once it didn't work, and then he was so rigid and didn't want to go back, he kind of, made his own bed. So, I mean, was this a good, option, going defense and then, having, obviously, another offensive coordinator come in and, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
For me personally, I really wasn't overly impressed with any offensive coach in this
Mm.
year's coaching
Mhm.
pool. I never really liked Dayball. I don't know why he gave me Matt Nagy vibes terribly.
Yeah,
And,
that's
I tried to sell myself on him at the end, but I was like, you know what? No, I was really high on Harbaugh. Apparently, the Bears had that combo, and it was just not going to happen. Which is after seeing him run through the Raiders and Vikings, I'm like, okay, I get it now. Honestly, Eberflus is probably, I would say, the best choice out there from just a
mm,
pure leadership perspective. My point purely was just it's a big risk to put your eggs in one basket for a young play caller, and it seems like Getsy has been was his guy from the jump, and it sounded like I think Dan Quinn also wanted to bring Getsy in, and people spoke super highly about him. So I hope it works out. That would be awesome if the Bears had the next young thing that came out of kind of out of nowhere, out of a good system, and that'd be awesome. For me personally, I was thinking Eberflus would get hired and maybe bring in someone like Jim Caldwell, who has plenty of offensive
right.
experience and who they were also looking at as coach, but age might have been a factor there. So,
Mhm.
but I'm not sold one way or the other. I think it could work out. That's just I think the offensive coordinator hire could determine how we view Eberflus really.
Absolutely. Chris, where are you at on Luke Getsy?
I mean, so like I'll touch on a couple things Lucas did, and obviously I'm gonna come off as mad optimistic because like
Ah,
I've been such a pessimistic person the entire offseason. So, going Brian Daboll, I mean, I think we all kind of had a feeling Matt Nagy was gonna get let go at the end of the year, and a lot
mhm.
of us liked Brian Daboll at the beginning of the year, or a lot of people liked Brian Daboll. I was probably the first one to start calling him out,
Mhm.
especially to Lucas on the side in text. I would just be like, "Hey, man, they just scored 6 points on the freaking Jaguars, bro. I mean, like, there
Mhm.
were games where they just shit the bed so badly, and you have a
Mhm.
top talent like Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, and it was just very confusing. So, and then the other side of it was, is he really this leader of men that they're looking for? Is he, regardless of offensive, defensive, special teams, is he going to be a leader and be the guy at the top of the food chain and command respect and command a room and know how to lead? And I just never got that feeling from Dayball. He's very apparently very soft spoken. Um, could be the smartest guy on the planet. Don't know. A lot of our other Bears fans have talked about how Ken Dorsey was a big influence on Josh
Mhm.
Allen,
Mhm.
and when he came in is when that offense really started to take off. You've seen past numbers with Dayball where they're just not that great. So we'll see how it works out in New York. It's going to be interesting to see, what they do. Another, charter franchise in New York in a big market. So it'll be really interesting to see how the Giants go. As far as Getsy and the system he came from, the guy I was super high on all season was Nathaniel Hackett, and I told
Mhm.
Lucas, on a consistent basis, this is the guy. I really hope we hire him. I want to see that Shanahan, Kubiak outside zone,
Mhm.
roll Justin out. It's almost the same system I would have run for Mitch, because they're not similar. Obviously, Justin's way more athletic, but Mitch was an athletic quarterback. He had his abilities that just weren't maximized by Nagy and staff. So I thought Hackett could design an offense around Justin, and I think Nagy's biggest problem is he was so rigid in his system that it was, I need this exact person, this exact profile. They need to be able to do this or my system won't work. It's like,
Mhm.
great, bro. You are an offensive guru in the National Football League. You need to come up with a system that works for the talent you have,
Mhm.
not the other way around. And I think that's what we're going to get in Luke Getsy. He comes from a couple different lines of systems that use design QB runs, deep passing. He, has been with the Packers 2 times. So he was with McCarthy when they were running West Coast stuff. And, apparently Aaron Rodgers absolutely loved Getsy. Both times he said, from what I understand, he was the reason that they brought Getsy back, as he pushed for him when LaFleur came in. So that, that makes me happy. Anytime you can take away from the Packers and grow the Bears, I think it's a positive.
Mhm.
So I'm very positive on Luke Getsy. I do understand the hesitations with a young play caller, a guy that's never called plays. But I think he is intelligent. He's been called a coach on the field all the way back to when he was a quarterback at Akron. His head coach, what's his Joe? What's his name? Lucas
Joe
Moorhead.
Moorhead.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
He loves Getsy. Said he was his QB quarterback coach on the field. So he's a very intelligent guy, from what it seems like. Really understands the game, soaks it up. Was a wide receivers coach. Devontae Adams had nothing but good things to say about him. Like, spoke about him like kind of off the cuff when he was his wide receivers coach, and told him how much he grew his game because he used to play quarterback and understands, like, from a quarterback's perspective, what they need out of the wide receiver. So as long as he knows how to game plan, call plays, I think we'll be fine. I think the positives he brings are, I think he's going to be able to construct an offense brand new. Doesn't matter if he's, building it from scratch, and it will be catered to the talent that's around the field, regardless of if that is Justin Fields or not. Nobody knows what's going to happen long term, and if he's here for any amount of time, he's going to build it for a different quarterback too. As God willing, it's always Justin, but in that he works out. But if it doesn't, I think that Getsy can build to the talent that is here, and not just fit my system or you're gone kind of thing, like Nagy did to certain players.
Yeah, that whole debate about it is. I like that we've got 2 ends of the spectrum on that. Young, versus experience. Because here's the thing: when you think about it, I really, if I was going to, go with a coach, I would have gone, offense, probably. But it would have been, the guy that was in Tampa. Can't think of his name right now.
Leftwich.
Leftwich, because he adapted. He was able to adapt to Tom Brady and change all that, So he had experience. But then, like, you go with that. I mean, so he had experience doing that. But sometimes you get someone with experience, and with Nagy, and I don't even really know how much experience he had with Kansas City, right? I mean, Andy Reid, he calls a lot of plays as well, and so, like, if you're newer at it, maybe that's good. Maybe he's a little bit more innovative and willing to kind of, just, look at it with fresh eyes, and look at himself and just the offense and just the talent that Justin Fields is, and what he can really do with the offense as a whole.
Yeah, and I think having, a defensive-minded head coach like Eberflus, and Eberflus wanting to basically have the coaches be, a big mixture of a coaching staff, as opposed to siloed in their own phases of the game. He talked about having, his voice to say, hey, this is the defense that they're going to run. Here are your checks. Here are your keys. Here's what's going to tell you what this guy's doing. This guy's not going to tell you anything. Here are the route concepts that are going to work against it. You can run a formation any way you want, but this is the kind of stuff that's going to work against this team, and help build an offensive game plan based around the defense that you're facing, so you can attack that defense and set the tone of the game, as opposed to other coordinators in the past who have said, we allow the defense to kind of set the tone of what we're going to do, which that's never going to work. We
Absolutely.
need to be the tone setters.
Well, speaking of Justin Fields, Lucas, what do you see as his strengths, and do you see him as did you see enough of him this past season to say, like, yeah, I mean, he can be the guy?
Yeah, so before I dive right into this, there
Yeah.
is just a quick anecdote about Justin Fields and Luke Getsy that I thought was interesting. Was that
Mhm.
Luke Getsy learned under Joe Moorhead, and Joe Moorhead was the coach at Penn State at the time when Justin Fields was
Oh,
basically committed there, and Joe Moorhead was taking the head coaching job at Mississippi State, and Justin Fields talked to his family, and he decommitted from Penn State and said Joe Moorhead was the main reason why, because he liked his system for quarterbacks, and he ended up going to Georgia. So it all kind of comes full circle. It's pretty funny that he decommitted because of Joe Moorhead, and now we have the guy here who's basically running that. He's going to be basically running a Joe Moorhead slash kind of Shanahan LaFleur offense mixture. So
interesting.
super
Yeah.
interesting on that front that Fields wanted to play in that system specifically. And like Chris alluded to, super quarterback friendly. There's going to be a lot of design quarterback runs in there, but then you're also going to have your play action and take a lot of shots downfield. So in that regard, really, if Getsy is adaptable to what Fields is good at, I think it's very. If you watch tape from last year, right, the times when Fields was very successful is when he was rolling out of the pocket and when he was in play action and throwing the ball downfield. I'm not just saying this because he's our quarterback, but Justin Fields, honestly, for a young QB, has some of the best downfield ball placement I've ever seen
Mm.
out of a lot of quarterbacks. I think his deep ball is fantastic. And if you really dig into some advanced metrics, he's among the top of the league in his deep ball placement. Last year, obviously, there was a lot of different things. It seemed like Chris said, Nagy kind of operated in a box and was like,
Mm-hmm.
you're running this offense, and if you're not doing this, then it's too bad. And I think it made a lot of guys look really bad, and I think it rubbed guys the wrong way, and they stopped trying a little bit at the end of the year. I know people like to pick on A-Rob, but I think A-Rob was definitely lacking a lot of effort last year because it was at the point where it was like the offense wasn't working, it wasn't changing. Matt Nagy's bread and butter was, running 5 to 10 yard routes, a bunch of hitches, stuff like that. And sure, that's fine for Andy Dalton or Nick Foles even, but if you're making Justin Fields operate in that offense, it's not his game.
Mm.
Personally,
Yeah.
for me, I think I've seen the flashes though that the talent is there, and it really seems like a guy who was just very poorly coached. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. I'm very high on Justin Fields still, and even the other rookie quarterbacks. I mean, there wasn't outside of Davis Mills and Mac Jones, there really wasn't a top rookie quarterback who played that great, and I think all of them kind of suffer from their coaching. So
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence was amazing. What are you talking about? No, I'm just kidding. I think he led the league in picks. No, I think the Pittsburgh game, the first Detroit game, we really saw what Justin Fields can be when he is let loose and when he has the system to kind of cater to his talents. And I think when somebody learns how to use his legs, when he learns how to use his legs correctly, it's going to be scary for other defensive coordinators to try to match up against Fields. They talked about the Nagy. I can't remember if it was Bill Lazor or who it was, but they basically said we don't have any me routes, which is like a guy that they are targeting on a specific route. It's all conceptual and it's all like reads and things like that. Like if you're not designing plays to specifically exploit a defense and go to a guy that is going to be a problem for the defense, then you're doing it wrong. I mean, plain and simple. If you ask me, if you're not, drawing up specific plays for Mooney, drawing up specific plays for A-Rob, drawing up specific plays for Komet, you're missing out. And I thought as far as Justin goes, the exciting plays that he had where he ran back and forth and then scored the 14-yard touchdown. The throws against some of the throws against Pittsburgh, the dime ball to A-Rob down the sideline against the Lions, the one down the middle to Mooney. He did miss a few deep balls long, which were like just gave me shudders a Mitch, but he'll be fine. He's one of the best deep ball passers in college, and according to like some advanced metric like Luke mentioned, he had some great deep ball statistics from last year that are just show a lot of promise. I mean, he's a rookie quarterback. People are expecting some kind of miracle. And the other thing is, like, you had Nagy, who you hate, the same people that didn't like what Justin was doing, was giving crap to Justin, are the same people that were telling us Matt Nagy needed to be fired 2 years ago. And it's like, okay, well, you can obviously see the connection here of what's going wrong. It's Nagy who is not really utilizing Fields. And don't get me wrong, I won't say that Justin didn't have his problems.
Right.
He needs to settle down. I mean, he had some bouncy games where he was kind of looking all over for the play. He tried to do too much at times. I thought, he ran around and ended up getting sacked a lot of times. So he's not without fault, but like I said, he's a 22-year-old kid. He's not really experienced in this league. Didn't get any practice time with the ones all through preseason. So at the time, I was kind of defensive about that, but at the same, now looking back, it was like, what were you even doing? Like, just give the guy reps.
Yeah, exactly. And I even kind of think about it too, like, especially as a young player, it's good to have like stability in the coaching staff to just kind of, when you're out there, you don't have to worry about that. And I know that, I don't know if I can't remember which game it was, if it was the Browns game or whatever, in the headset, basically they're telling them two different things, and as a, talented player, like, even if you're like amazing at your job and you have your boss, you're trying to close a deal or something, you have your boss like in your ear, telling you different things, and it almost psychs you out. And like, I'm excited to kind of see going forward, obviously with a new coaching staff, fresh start, what he can do. And it was really interesting how obviously he was in the press conference. I liked that, that they were basically, they're making him the face of the franchise, and he needs to, he's there, and I like that, one thing I wanted to talk about as well is, you brought up Darnell Mooney, and he had a 1,000-yard season, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I, for our NFC North podcast, I went ahead and looked, and I immediately got sick. But I looked at the Bears receiving leaders, and I was surprised that Walter Payton is pretty far up there in the receiving, all-time Bears receiving list. And it's just crazy. You think of these receivers, so it's nuts.
That's crazy.
Crazy. Go ahead and look at it.
No, he played for a good amount of time, but like, that is crazy. I mean, you think about some of the,
he's like 4 or 5 or something like that. Yeah.
But like, I guess Willie Gault wasn't really there that long. He had, he and
Marshall Jeffrey,
going back to like, what was it, like Mark? What was his name?
I mean, even A-Rob. I mean, A-Rob had some.
I'm gonna see if he had some good years. I'm gonna see if I can Knox had some good years.
Because like, I mean, it's few and far between. And a lot of that's on the quarterback play, right? In now, obviously we have a quarterback, hopefully that's set for a while. So my question is then, is Darnell Mooney a number one receiver going forward?
No, he's not a one. He's not a one. He's not an alpha. He's a 1A, very, very talented human being, but I don't think he is he's not Tyreek Hill, so he's not fast enough and to really take the top off like that and run routes based on his just flat out go-kart ability. I made a joke the other day where, like, if Kyler Murray threw it to Tyreek Hill, it looked like he was throwing it to himself, because they're both so, they look like
they're
mice.
So insanely
they're
fast.
so fast and just bouncy. They're so quick. He's not that guy. He's not, D-Hop, where he's going to just body somebody and jump up and get the ball. He's not Calvin Johnson, going back to guys even his size. He's not Steve Smith. Steve Smith was violent. He could run after the catch very, very well. I love Darnell Mooney. There's no hate at all. I just don't think he's an alpha.
Yeah, and I think he definitely, he had an amazing season, but I mean, another receiver there. I found my list here. Number 1 is Johnny Morris from the 50s and 60s. Peyton is number 4. Mike Ditka is number 5. Matt Forte is number 7. And these are on the all-time Bears receiving list. And so, like, for me, I'm a huge A-Rob fan, and we're gonna miss him. Do you think it was more the scheme, or does he just not have that? Did he just not have that connection with Fields?
I think there was a lot of things in play with this year. I think
Chris wants to just take a timeout on this one.
Yeah, I know Chris has a lot of thoughts on the A-Rob situation. For me personally, I almost feel bad for the guy a little bit. I feel like the Bears I feel like he should have gotten a deal. Now I don't really, I wasn't at the negotiating table and I wasn't there, but he was basically the Bears' best offensive player for 2 or 3 years, and going into a contract year, obviously, he tore his ACL in the past. As a player, that's scary. You're getting one more big contract in your career, and if you get hurt, it could all go down the drain. So I felt kind of bad he didn't get his contract, but then he got tagged, and it seemed like he was just completely checked out. So for me personally, it's like I get it, but then I also stuff like that kind of drives me nuts. And I know Matt Eberflus, if anything like that happened under Eberflus's watch, you would be on the bench. You'll be on the bench immediately. Those kind of guys are not going to last long in this new system. So there's definitely a lot in play there, but I'd be lying to you if I said the Bears didn't need Allen Robinson this year. I mean, free agent class, it feels like multiple guys in there tore their ACLs, and the Bears have 5 draft picks and a lot of holes. And I know we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's kind of dicey on what they're going to do at wide receiver.
I miss A-Rob from 2 years ago.
Yes.
Yep. He's extremely talented, physically, made some great catches, diving catches. I think I don't really know what to. I think he let a lot of the noise get to him, and a lot of that affected how he was playing the game. He stopped playing for, playing football and started playing for contract, or started like letting the stupid Twitter get in his head. He went on Twitter way too much to talk to fans or talk back to fans. His agent did a lot of the same things, talked to myself. He's talked back to me before. He's talked back to a couple of other guys in our group chat. So I was really disappointed in this last season, two seasons pretty much with A-Rob. And then last season, he honestly looked like he quit. Not a lot of effort in blocking, not a lot of effort in route running. You saw a lot of just him stopping on routes and dogging it. It looked like, that's just what it looked like. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. I think he's frozen, Lucas.
Uh-oh. It's just mean. This is the Believe in Monsters podcast now.
We have taken over the show.
Oh God, we actually did.
Oh, we have NFL Outdated has let Believe in Monsters go ahead and take over this podcast. We will be live
talking about A-Rob.
Darnell, Mooney, A-Rob. No, this list of wide receivers for the Bears, Alshon is third, which is crazy. Hey, we're back.
All right, yeah. We must. My internet. So, all right, we're back. I think we're still going. So that'll.
No, we're still going. We took over for a little bit. We turned it into the Believe in Monsters.
I'm
podcast
down with that.
for 2 seconds.
I'm down with that.
Yeah, no, we were just talking about A-Rob, but no, this receivers list is pretty funny. I was just taking a look at that. But.
It's crazy, and kind of going, then to the other side of the ball. Obviously, we definitely need that receiver. But kind of going to the other side of the ball, what do you see kind of some of the key, targets defensively? It'll be interesting, like Akeem Hicks, do you think he would, be someone that they should bring back now with the new regime? Or
so I have a few kind of thoughts about the defense. So I don't think switching to a 4-3 is a huge deal. But I will say there are a few glaring weaknesses by going to that. The Bears defense still had some weaknesses in a 3-4 or a 4-3, but basically in a 4-3, I was listening to a Colts podcast a Bears podcast that had a Colts guest, and they were saying Matt Eberflus's 3 biggest positions, the most important positions are his 3 technique, which is DeForest Buckner there, his will linebacker, which is Darius Leonard, and here I think will be Roquan Smith, so no issue there. And his nickel corner, who, we've seen some promise out of Thomas Grimm, but we don't know what kind of commodity he is. So kind of 2 out of 3 there being the most important pieces has me a little bit on edge. I don't know what the Bears are going to do with their D-line, to be honest with you. I think Akeem Hicks could be a dominant 3 technique.
Mhm.
It depends how much the new regime is willing to pay him. I mean, he's had his injury history and the whole 9 yards, so we'll see. I do think, we have Angelo Blackson, who had a fairly underrated year. I think he would be a decent addition, but I do think they need to fortify their D-line somehow, maybe add a piece or 2. I definitely think the Bears need a Mike linebacker, a middle linebacker, who right now I think would be Alec Ogletree. It's not really inspiring confidence in me, in us stopping the run. Like prime Danny Trevathan would have been awesome in that position, but obviously we don't have that. Even Nick Kwiatkowski would have been awesome there. And then I think the Bears really need a corner opposite Jalen Johnson. They need another. I mean, I think Jalen Johnson's an alpha. I think he's a number 1 corner, but draft, free agency, you could add a variety of pieces, but I think they need to do something. A target there could be Chardavius Ward, maybe from the Chiefs. Ryan Poles would be familiar with him.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think, Chris, does that how much does it hurt the Bears to not have that first round draft pick this year? And maybe would they go back and trade some pieces to maybe get some more picks?
Ryan Poles did say he wants to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. He did say he wants to have more picks, but he also kind of checked that.
He danced around it. Yeah.
He said it's great to have more picks, and some years you'll want more picks, or he said ideally it's great to have more picks all the time, but it just really depends on the situation. Sometimes we'll go up to get a guy, sometimes we'll trade back. It's really going to depend on the situation and the roster construction and things like that. As far as it's going to hurt not having a first round pick. It always does. I mean, you need that kind of top end talent on your team, or the ability to drop back and add more mid-level talent or top 10 talent if you believe in yourself and your scouting team to find those guys in the mid to late rounds. So I think will they trade some pieces to land a first round pick? I just don't see the salary cap flexibility to do that. So the guys that could be traded to land a top end pick, which I don't think there's anybody on the roster worth a first that I want to give up right now. I'm not giving up Roquan,
Nope.
So I don't think Khalil Mack will fetch a first anymore. And I don't think his contract would warrant trading him anyway. I think we'd end up losing a lot of money. Robert Quinn, for a second, you could talk me into. I think we have some defensive end depth that could work out, and you could still get a second round pick to, get the team a little younger. I mean, you're not there. No. I mean, Robert Quinn is going to be good in that system, but you're not going to compete in the time that Robert Quinn has left here, in my opinion. So if you can get something for him, I wouldn't hate that.
It's a good time to flip him too.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I don't think Eddie Jackson's going to fetch much. So I don't think the guys that are, the higher end contracts that are going to end up costing you money to trade anywhere are worth what you're going to get in return outside of maybe Quinn. So I'm hoping that what we'll see out of Poles is potentially trade down in the second and get an extra fourth or maybe 2 fifths or something like that. And that he can find some of that mid-level talent to, get this team younger, replace a lot of the high-end free agents that we have leaving, which, we have 39 free agents that are going to not be on the books anymore. And some of that's good. Some of that's bad, mostly bad. We're going to have a lot of dead cap space for a while.
Especially a quarterback, right?
Yeah, especially a quarterback and tight end. So
that's another position. I named all defensive positions, but going to offense, you need another receiver at least. I would say you're going to need a tight end who can I have faith in Cole Kmet, but I think they need a U tight end like Jimmy Graham. Just a guy that's going to receive and not really block.
Just for Horsted, bro.
If Poles sees the potential in him and wants him, I would love to see more of Jesper Horsted this year.
I've
talked to Chris I've talked to Chris about this at length. I think the Bears offensive line is going to get nuked this year. I think a lot of people like the James Daniels, the Cody Whitehairs of the world, I think they're all out of the door. Mustafa. I think they're going to basically have Jenkins and Borum and blow up the rest.
Well, that, Jenkins and Borum, that would not be a bad start, I guess, from last year. Yeah, Daniels would be the interesting thing, whether he
Do you
stays.
re-sign him?
Yeah,
Whitehair has an out in his contract this year where he could save $8 million, and Mustafa's just been bad, and he's a free agent. So, which lineman do you draft there? Do you move Jenkins back to right tackle and then have to sign a left tackle? Where do you play Borum? So there's a lot of questions up front. You could do a variety of things.
And that's probably where they're going to start, with Poles' kind of background, right?
Right. Yeah, and they just hired Chris Morgan from the Steelers, who apparently improved that line once he kind of took over as the main guy as their offensive line coach. Had good things, said about him from his Atlanta days, coached under Shanahan. So you can kind of see the whole network connection of all these guys, with Getsy under MLF and Shanahan on that same staff in Atlanta. So you can see all these things kind of aligning with the stars.
Well, kind of speaking of that, stars, I give my the Packer fans or friends a hard time that the Bears are going to sign Devontae Adams, but I don't know if they even can afford him.
$30 million.
I know, but I tell you, I mean, if they had a top end receiver to kind of go with that, and just kind of a younger one to maybe grow with Fields, and if they had some of that offensive firepower and obviously that line, I like just the potential of the growth of that offense. And then, obviously you just got to, hope that the schemes are all right for him as well.
Yeah, I see. I would say I'm pretty opinionated on certain positions being draftable and other ones that you can just, you can kind of pick someone to plug in. And it seems like the trend with wide receivers is that a ton of wide receivers out of college, first, second, third. I mean, Mooney was a 5th round pick, and we're asking if he's a number 1 receiver, can step in immediately, make an impact. And this year is another deep draft. The Bears could be in round 2 and be looking at, maybe a David Bell from Purdue or Traylon Burks from Arkansas, George Pickens from Georgia. Those are 3 just off the top of my head. And there's like 5 guys in front of them are going to go in the first round. So I think they could maybe get away with getting, maybe a lower tier receiver in free agency and drafting one early and then still having a much better receiver room.
I do like that because, I mean, what you guys have been talking about as well, they're not ready. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Green Bay does, but you can't, build your roster off of what another team is doing. You want to build, for the future. And so it's sustainable. And like, if you go ahead and sign a Devontae Adams or somebody for 20, 30 million, then you're just kind of like, we're not at that point yet, are we?
I hope they sign him for 30 million. There's not a Super Bowl winning team with a high priced wide receiver in the past 15 years. I mean, once you sign that big contract, we had this debate not too long ago, and our friend said that Tyreek Hill was about to win a Super Bowl after he got his $19 million, and sure enough, they didn't win it. And I was like, okay, I mean, you can't afford to pay a guy that is, one piece of the puzzle that guys can scheme around, especially for a team that doesn't have, a Travis Kelce. And look at the rest of their weapons. I mean, Kelsey's great. Don't get me wrong. And their running game is okay. But, man, Pringle and Mecole Hardman, I mean, those guys aren't really scaring that many people.
Nope.
I mean, but Tyreek is scary, and they got ousted again,
Yep.
So I don't want to see us spend a boatload of cash on wide receiver.
No,
That's just
my
opinion.
I think they're going to put a lot of it into the lines, to be honest with you. I think that's really where they're going to start. And like I said, I think some guys that we think are good are just going to be out, and, some fans might be a little upset, but I think it's going to be the way the new regime does things. And especially you spoke about the new line coach coming from the Shanahan tree. I mean, it's a different style of running game too. You're going to need linemen that fit that system, who are going to be able to get out in space and zone block, as opposed to, just gap block or whatever. So there's a lot that goes into this, and I trust Poles. If there's one place I trust Poles to get it right, it's there.
I agree. Well, I mean, I could definitely talk Bears football all night. I just had one last question for each of you, kind of rapid fire. How many years are the Bears away from a Super Bowl? Chris, go ahead.
2 to 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say at least 2, but Joe Burrow this year gives me hope that if Justin Fields is that guy, it might be sooner.
Yeah, it is. That's yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of pieces this year to add. But when you look at the NFC, it's probably a clearer path on the NFC than it is on the AFC, isn't it?
If Rodgers leaves the NFC this year, I mean, it's wide open. I think the Bears could win the division without Rodgers next year, to be honest. I mean,
I think you're going to see, if you see a lot of roster turnover, which most GMs do, I think Pace had his roster completely turned over inside of 2 years. So I think you're going to see some roster turnover, like Lucas mentioned, and we're going to see a lot of our own guys. Poles mentioned that he really likes the second and third wave of free agency, which makes me feel like he sees value there. He sees talent there. So I think, I thought Pace that was some of the things that Pace really did well, and he was kind of forced his hand, was finding those, those value free agents. Akeem Hicks. When he was signed was a great value add. Danny Trevathan when he was signed.
Allen Robinson.
Yeah. Jarrell Freeman for all the whatever. PEDs, PDAs, whatever he took was not good. So for all those he took, he was a good signing. Angelo Blackson looks like he was a good ad. He found some undrafted free agents, Bryce Callahan and whatever old boy that got hurt, that wide receiver that disappeared into thin air after he got hurt. Yeah, Cam Meredith.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not like Pace completely missed the boat, but hopefully what I'm saying is that Poles can do that same thing in those value free agents, fill out the roster in spots that can be filled out, kind of like Lucas mentioned with wide receiver. There's certain positions that you can have either a rotation of guys that'll fulfill the same, responsibility that a superstar would, until you can kind of build up that draft capital, get rid of this dead weight in salary cap. I think the salary cap is going to explode in the next 2 years with this TV deal. And I think, you're seeing a lot of the contracts reflect that. But again, I don't want to see high-priced wide receivers. Dallas has 2 high-priced wide receivers. They were great, but they relied a lot on some young defensive studs, and it didn't pan out. So I think we're at least 2 years away. Next year is going to be a mild rebuild. I hope he just retools and doesn't completely rip it apart. I have some different feelings on the offensive line that we have. I think they might need an attitude adjustment a little bit, but I think the system can also mask a lot of the challenges. When you saw them run that outside stretch zone, they were phenomenal. They can move well in space. Daniels and Whitehair can move well in space. Man, even old man Peters was running well in space, so, and you run more screens and draws, which Nagy just refused to do. You kind of slow down those pass rushers, and offensive line doesn't have to be that great. You look at the Bengals, man, they're okay, they're in the Super Bowl. So I think we're a couple years away, at least, maybe 3.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. I really would. With what we've kind of gone through, with quarterbacks and coaches, I'd be okay with that. And so well, I could definitely talk Bears football forever. Where can we find you again?
We can be found every week on the BIM podcast at BIM_pod on Twitter. We are on Apple and
basically any streaming service,
Spotify,
besides Amazon.
Because Lucas doesn't want to do the paperwork. But no, they take forever. They're just ridiculous. But yeah, no. We just launched a YouTube channel, so we'll be live on you. We're going to start doing more live stuff. Have more fan interaction. Hopefully, we're really ramping up this year. I think this will be this was my first year on the pod with the guys. They
Yeah.
started kind of preseason last year. So next year will be our first full season with the three of us. So we're really excited. Myself, I'm at Shy Bears 1985, CHI Bears 1985. You can find Lucas. Go ahead, Lucas.
You can find me at lberry_40. Berry, like spelled like the fruit, LBERRY_40. And yeah, follow the pod. And honestly, thank you so much for having us on. This was a great time. Like you said, we could talk Bears all night. We did it yesterday for an hour and a half. We talked to you here for an hour.
Absolutely.
It's easy. It's the team we love, so it's fun, and you're more than welcome on Believe in Monsters anytime. We would love to have you sometime.
Well, and thanks for rolling with it when my internet went down or something. So,
all good.
So, well, all right, we'll get to a last Go Bears, and then we're out. So I'll get a Go Bears from you guys.
Go Bears.
Go Bears, baby.
Have a good night, guys.
You too.